Hello, my name is Nichelle M. And today we will be discussing African American genealogy. I hope that you enjoy the presentation. I will now start sharing my screen so you can see the slides. So for some of you, this might be the first time that you have started to do research in your family. And so what I'm going to try to do is to help the beginning researcher, especially those who are researching African American genealogy. This will be a good time to get something to take some notes on, whether you do that electronically or with paper and pen. As I said before, my name is Nichelle Hayes, and I am the leader of the Center for Black Literature and Culture, which is part of the Indianapolis Public Library. And we are located at Central Branch, which is at 40 East St. Clair. If you would like to learn more about the Center for Black Literature and Culture, please go to ndpl.org/CBLC. So, how to begin? The first thing you want to do when you're starting your research is to either write down or input into a database all the information that you currently know. And you definitely want to cite your sources. If your source is that this is firsthand knowledge, then that's what you would write down. If this is from a birth certificate, death certificate, obituary, funeral program, then you would want to cite that as well. Citing your sources is very, very important. So African American research is very similar to other ethnic groups. The big difference comes with the 1870 brick wall, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. As I mentioned before, writing down everything into a database or on a piece of paper is really critical. I call that a brain dump. You want to verify the documentation of all the information you obtained, either from word of mouth or that you think you know. As I said before, remember to cite your sources. Be careful to document where the information was found, especially oral interviews. So if you found something in a archive, or if you went to the Allen County Genealogy Center, then you would document that. That way, if you need to go back and double check your work, or if someone else is trying to check your work, then they would be able to do that. So here we have a website. This is really, really great. It's called vitalrec.com, vitalrec.com. And on this website, you can access information for birth certificates, death records, marriage licenses for all the 50 states. And then you can also determine when a particular state started to keep that information and keep those records. This is a great way to bypass having to purchase them through a third party, which can be more expensive. It will also tell you how much that particular form costs, and it will give you the information on how to request that. So, as I mentioned before, doing a brain dump or writing down all the information that you have is important. And so what we have on the screen here is a 4-generation pedigree chart. So you would start with yourself, and so that's where it says you, and then you would want to put your first, middle, and last name. And so if you have changed your name for any reason, you would want to put down the name that you were born with, and you can cite any name changes later in another form. You want to put down your birth date, day, month, and year, the birthplace, if you're married, marriage date, and marriage location. And then we start working on our parents. So we put down all the information we know about them using that same way of noting down the information. If a person went by a particular nickname, that might be something that you could note, but you definitely want to put down that quote unquote government name. And I can't stress enough that when you're putting down names for women in your family that might have married, you want to put down their birth name, and we can note any married names if they change their names at a later time. But you want to be able to tie them to their birth family. And so, as I said before, this is a 4-generation chart. So you just continue to go down the line, male, female, entering all the information that you have. And here is a family group sheet. And the difference between a family group sheet and the pedigree sheet is that the family group sheet is just showing us information for a nuclear family. So that would be a mother, a father, and children. And so again, you're going to fill this out as completely as you can. And so you're going to have a family group sheet for every nuclear family that you have that you're doing research for. And so again, you're going to put first, middle, and last. I refer to those nicknames if they use those. You're going to put down when they were born, when they were married, if they're deceased, when they were buried and where, if they had any additional marriages, and then put down the husband's father's name and the husband's mother's name. Again, full names and birth names. And then if you know what hospital that particular person was born in, or maybe it was that person was born at someone's home, that you would note that as well. And then if you need additional sheets because you have additional children, feel free to do that. That's very important to capture the entire family. Here we come to interviewing. Interviewing is very, very important. You want to interview early and often. Don't leave any stone unturned. Talk to anyone that's a part of the family. Let them talk about anything that they want to talk about. If they're giving you information that might be contrary to what you found, I would just take in that information and then try to verify those sources. Oftentimes, if you push back during an interview, that can kind of cut the interview short, and that person might be resistant to share with you. So just kind of let that person talk and maybe ask some additional questions if there's something that you don't understand. Try to interview all your direct ancestors. Ask them about their grandparents, their great-grandparents. Take written notes, create a video and or audio recording, and then transcribe those recordings and then share those with your family members. It's very important to share your results. You're never going to be finished, but if you hide everything and keep that within just your home and you don't share that, then that could very well be lost if you pass away and have not shared that information. Also, when you share that information, family members become very excited and then they want to help you or give you additional information. So sharing is very important. So you definitely want to learn about these different areas. You want to learn about the neighborhoods that they lived in, any fraternal groups that they might have been a part of, local churches that they might have been a member of, and funeral homes. So oftentimes when people moved, especially during the Great Migration, they moved as a group or as a unit. So it wasn't just one person leaving, it was the entire family leaving. And so when you're looking in the neighborhoods and census records, it's a good idea to go back 5 pages when you find someone and forward 5 pages to see if you can find any additional family members. Migration patterns are very, very important. So we know the Great Migration was when many Blacks came from the South and went to the North. And so they might have been living in Louisiana or Tennessee and then came up to Detroit or Chicago or even Indianapolis. So determining those migration patterns will help you as you're doing your research. Local churches, oftentimes people worship together, and then funeral homes, surprisingly, many times family members use the same funeral home. And so if those funeral homes still have records, that might be another way that you can determine information. So here are some places that you can look for information. County courthouse, attics, Funeral homes, as I mentioned before, newspapers, and we're going to go into that in a little more depth. Archives, neighbors, especially if they've been long-standing neighbors, you'd be surprised what information that they might have. State archives, local libraries, and city directories. City directories are very much like white pages, and they had information about where the individual lived, the spouse, if there was one, and oftentimes even what their occupation was. So city directories are very beneficial, and many of those have been digitized. So here we have information about Hoosier Chronicles, and the website is there, the URL, and that's a place where you can access a lot of papers in that were printed in Indiana. They have a great text search option, so you can search for particular text, or you can search for particular dates. So the Indianapolis Recorder started in 1895. Those have been digitized, but there are some missing years. I think it's from 1917 to maybe 1920. The Indianapolis Leader began in 1879. And then we had two other African-American newspapers that debuted around the same time, the Indianapolis Freeman, which was in 1884, and the Indianapolis Color World, which was in 1883. And so there's a reason that I am mentioning Black newspapers, because oftentimes the focus of a mainstream paper like Indianapolis Star or Indianapolis News was on more individuals that were white, whereas your Black newspapers were focusing on people of color. So you're going to have more of a depth of coverage on the things that were going on there. Another Black paper we had in Indianapolis was the Indianapolis Herald, and that was founded in 1959. So again, when you're doing a search here, you can do a search by keyword or search by date. Another source to access information in newspapers is newspapers.com. So Hoosier Chronicles is free, and so anyone can access that. Newspapers.com is a subscription service, but it is very beneficial. So here we have a clipping of not a direct ancestor, but a great-grand uncle, and his name was William H. Emerson. And he's someone I just stumbled upon when I was doing some other research when I was looking at the recorder. But because I had a connection to that name and it resonated with me, I looked at it and did some further digging. And so we're going to look at that particular news slide. So this is William Henry Emerson. It gives me a lot of information in this particular obituary. It gives me his picture. I never would have had that picture otherwise. It tells me where he was buried. It gives me his full name, his age, his address at the time of his death, when and where he died, the location of the funeral, the names of the officiants or the reverends, how long he had been married, including the date, the name of his wife, previous places that he had lived. He had lived in Ohio, the name of his sisters, his children, and his nieces, and his place of burial. So this one small article gave me a lot of information. So these are things that you can find in newspapers. So while we're talking about obituaries, funeral programs are another great source of information. However, I will caution you that with funeral programs, there can be some information that is omitted, and there could be some errors. So that's not considered a primary source, that's considered a secondary source. So you would always want to verify the information that you were able to glean in either an obituary or a funeral program. But again, as you're citing your sources, if you come upon conflicting information, you'll be able to determine where you found that from. So here's another great source if you're looking for African American newspapers around the country. So this particular book is Finding and Using African American Newspapers by Tim Pinnock. And this is a research guide that will help help historians and genealogists to uncover newspapers around the country that you might not be aware of. And so you can pick this book up wherever books are sold. So here are some records that we can access if we're looking prior to 1870. So we can look at slave schedules, tax records, transfer documents, databases, particularly in Louisiana, wills, probate records, county records, plantation, farm records, and manumission records. So here's a blank 1850 slave schedule. And so at the top there, you'll see that it gives you information about the name of the slave owners, the number of slaves, age, sex, color. And so you'll have black, mulatto, etc. In Louisiana, it might have quadroon, octoroon. If they're a fugitive from the state, the number of people there, if they were deaf, dumb, blind, insane. So that's a lot of information. Now, the only thing that you don't receive from that is a name. There are about a handful of areas that did name the enslaved persons, but that did not happen across the country. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. It also talks about acts of resistance, and so that's when they're talking about fugitives. So those are freedom seekers. So here's an actual slave schedule from Barron County. And so it tells you when they did the enumeration, by whom, it gives you the state, and it tells you the division and the schedule, as we said before. So here are the counties that listed enslaved persons by name. So in 1850, Utah County in Utah, Bowie County in Texas, Scott County in Tennessee, and then we have several counties in the 1860s, Virginia, Kentucky, North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, and then the second ward in St. Louis. So if you happen to have relatives that were in those areas, you might be able to stumble upon their actual names in those slave schedules. Again, most slave schedules did not give you the names. It just tells you big picture how many people were living on that farm or plantation. So slave schedules were done for 1850 and 1860. They were only done for certain states, and those are listed on the screen there. So I'll give you a moment to be able to review that. So here are some books that will help you on your search. That first book is Black Roots, A Beginner's Guide to Tracing the African American Family Tree. That's an excellent book. It tells you about some pitfalls to avoid. I would highly recommend that you put that in your personal library. The next one is African American Ancestors, another great book. Then we have Finding Your African American Ancestors, A Beginner's Guide. We already talked about Tim Pennick's book about African American newspapers. And then finally, we have Finding a Place Called Home, A Guide to African American Genealogy and Historical Identity by Dr. D. Palmer Woodford. This is an excellent book. It goes from beginner to advanced, but it's definitely something you want to have in your library so that you can refer to it and help you as you're doing your research. So here are some resources that we have at the Indianapolis Public Library at Digital Indy. So we have been able to scan the Indianapolis High School yearbooks. And so if your ancestors lived here in Indianapolis and attended high school here, that's a great place to go to find pictures about them or activities that they might have participated in when they were in high school. So here are records for the post-Civil War agencies. And this is a pamphlet that was created by the National Archives. And so this is Black Family Research. And it gives you information on Reconstruction era federal records, Talks about all the records that you can get to bridge the gap between enslavement and freedom. It talks about Civil War federal agencies, records that were housed at the NARA, Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, Abandoned Lands, Freedmen Savings and Trust Company, just a lot of great information. And this is a booklet that you can request online if you go to the National Archives, NARA, and they also would probably have it in your local libraries. And so the reference information paper for this is 108. So here we have some additional resources from the National Archives. And I won't read each one of those, but you can kind of see those, and I'll give you a moment to look at them. So there's a lot of information online that you can access, a lot of sources, but I would encourage you to put boots on the ground, or if you are unable to actually physically go to a particular location, to write to a county courthouse, to write to a historical society and obtain additional information. Unfortunately, everything has not been digitized, everything is not online, so there is some actually boots on the ground work you'd still have to do. So here are some things to remember. You want to start with yourself. As I said before, dump all the information you have, then write down all the information you have for your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and so on and so forth. Be persistent. Sometimes it'll be very hard and you won't be able to find the information you need. Sometimes you need to put down that particular family line and go to a different one and pick up that research and then come back to the other one. Organization is key. You want to document, as I said before, where you're finding your information, cite your sources. You want to have some kind of organizational system. For you, maybe that's physical files, or maybe it's digital files, maybe it's using a database, but whatever you use, you want to be consistent with that. Here are some other resources that you can use. Local genealogy societies or historical societies, talking to individuals that are researching in your location of interest, share resources, especially if you're not familiar with a particular area. There are online email groups that you can join, like afrogenius.com and RootsWeb. There are a lot of different groups on Facebook in different areas of interest. Find a Grave is great. Billion Graves is also great. And then there's the Center for Black Genealogy.org. So this is information for the Indiana African American Genealogy Group. So that's a group that meets in Indianapolis. They meet on a monthly basis, and they have a very robust website. This is membership based, but they have, as I said, monthly meetings as well as an annual conference in September. So this is a great organization to check out if you're looking to connect with other people that are doing the same kind of work that you are. So another great resource that we have in Indiana is the Allen County Genealogy Center. So that is in Allen County, which is where Fort Wayne is located. That's northern Indiana. And so they have a lot of information on African Americans. So this is a snapshot of their African American gateway. So it talks about states, regions, other countries, and then it's broken down by subject and legacy events. Kurt Witcher is the director there, and he does an amazing job. And so they have some amazing resources. If you're ever able to visit in person, please go. But you can also access a lot of information online. So definitely do an internet search for the Genealogy Center in Allen County. So when all else fails, ask a librarian. And something I always like to mention to people is don't forget the present. Right now, we're going through unprecedented times in the United States and actually around the world. Write down the things that you're doing, the things that are going on, maybe changes that have happened in your family. Document the history that's being made every day. You also want to keep track of children that are being born, when people are getting married, when they're moving, unfortunately, when people are passing away. If you're doing family research, you want to document all of that, so you can have something to hand to the next generation. So this is a picture of me with my maternal grandmother. Her name was Anna Mae. And I have a blog that I use, and my tagline is Anna Mae's oldest grandbaby. So pictures are very, very important. They do speak loudly, and a picture does tell 1,000 words. And so make sure that you're taking pictures currently, as well as trying to get old pictures and identifying who's on the picture. So that's key. So it's great to have a picture, but it's even better to have a picture and to know who the individuals are in that particular picture. Okay. So that concludes our program. Don't give up. Thank you very much, Asante Sana. And if you'd like, you can check out my blog, the Ties That Bind blog. Have a great day.